Welcome to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns. In Ireland, the pint is so much more than just a drink. And on today's show, I'm joined by Ollie Dunworth, author of A Compendium of Irish Pints, a book which offers a fascinating look at Ireland's pint culture. From the nation's favorite occasions for a drink, to the traditions and quirks that makes the Irish pub so special. On the show, Ollie gives us a tour of pints from the book before sharing some of her favorite pubs in Dublin. Along the way, she shares with us her love for snugs and which Irish town she believes might just be the capital of snug life. She tells us why Christmas is a particularly magical time to have a pint in Ireland, what snacks to order in the pub, why beer mats play a big role in pub culture, and what she thinks about Irish pubs around the world. All right, grab yourself an Irish stout and let's go to Ireland.
What is the gap between the train and the platform?
Welcome to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns. Ollie Dunworth, a food and drink journalist and the author of A Compendium of Irish Pints. Welcome, Ollie.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you stopping by to talk in between pints.
Yeah.
I've asked you to come on Rails, Ales, and Old Towns today to talk to me primarily about A Compendium of Irish Pints. This book, it's an A to Z, or A to Z, however you want to call it.
It's Zed, definitely Zed.
Of pints. But, you're not talking pours and brands necessarily. What you've done here is just offered a cultural insight into Ireland. And that's really what I fell in love with the book about.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when I first told people about the book, and before people see it or read it, they assume it's a list of recommended pubs or recommended places to drink. And there's definitely pubs mentioned in it, but it's not like a listicle. It's not a best of. It's an insider look at how we think about pints and pub culture in Ireland.
There are a few pubs mentioned. I am going to ask you about that at some point. What motivated you to write it and share this all with us?
Well, the book was a bit of a COVID baby because I moved home with my parents for a few years. I was still working away, but very much at home at my desk. And of course, we missed socializing. And I think there was a lot of conversation around how it wasn't that we could drink at home every day if we wanted to, and some people did. So it wasn't the drink that we missed, but it was the act of going to the pub. It was that social aspect. From the very first kind of week we had lockdown in Ireland, I had a group called After Work Pints. We used to always go for a pint on a Friday. That moved online. And it lasted for a good few months. Eventually, you're like, it's not the same having a can on a video call. And I think having conversations about how much we miss the pub and what that meant, either in real life, having those conversations, or on social media, made me think about everything around the pint, and that the pint meant not just the drink. And sort of how I pitched the book was, I suppose if you go right back, I had the idea I mentioned it to a friend who's a publisher while we were drinking pints at a party. And I mentioned a few ideas I had to her. And she was like, is there a book? I don't know. And I wrote them all down in a list. Probably wrote down 25 pints, Irish pints, reasons, occasions for pints. And that was the beginning of the book. A lot of them, they're all only a couple of pages long, but it was interesting to look back at the history.
We might as well just dive in. There's no need to mess around. Let's go through a few of these. It would be new to someone, because we're coming at this from a traveler perspective.
Yeah.
Who wants to embrace all things Ireland and do the best they can to kind of read the room, know what's going on. Talk about the airport pints. I've heard you talk. That one is very special to your heart.
That's very special, but also I think it's very Irish. I don't think there's many airports you can have as much fun having a pint as you can in Dublin Airport. There's just always kind of an air of, well, it's holiday. People are excited and it doesn't matter. I know people talk a lot about it. There's no time in the airport be there at 7 a.m. It feels the same as 7 p.m. You can do whatever you want. You're getting on the plane. There is something special about that. And I think I talk about how in social media in the last, like, however, it's probably a decade now that, you post that picture of your pint, your passport, and you're like, out of office. Like, it's really cliched, but it's really hard not to do it when you feel smug in the airport, and you're almost doing it in a satirical way now, but you still want to do it just to let everyone know, see you later. But like having a pint with that is special. And in Ireland, definitely in Dublin, there's a lot of talk about where the best pint in the airport is, because they're not all created equal. And there's been work going on in Dublin Airport recently. They've actually just built a new old pub in Terminal 2, which is very, very nice. I mean, it's not authentic, but it definitely doesn't feel too twee. So I think it'll be a nice place for a pint before you jet off.
What do you think about a train station pint? It's got its own personality too, waiting for a train pint.
Have you been on the train in Ireland?
I have once.
It's not great. Everything just goes from Dublin out. There's very little connected. They're more commuter hubs. There's not a lot going on in the train stations in Dublin. There's a decent one in Houston station where you can actually get a pretty good fry. So it's nice to have a pint and like a fry up if you want. But I do love the idea of having a pint before you travel anywhere.
Absolutely.
And the people watching is fantastic in airports and train stations, just having a pint. And like I do write in the book about solo drinking. And I think there's not lots of places that people feel really comfortable drinking on their own. And if you're in a train station or an airport or you're in transit anywhere, you kind of feel more comfortable having a drink on your own, I think.
Now, if there was one pint that really grabbed me, I mean, there was a lot, I'll be honest, but the Christmas pint and the way you described it and kind of the magic and the timings around it.
Yeah, Christmas is a very special time in Ireland for like socializing. I don't know, there's something December, it's so dark here in the winter. We have these really gorgeous long summers where sometimes it feels like it's bright like until 10 or 11 at night, and it's bright from 4 a.m. And then the winter, it's like the opposite. So there's something about December, we just go for it, and you kind of start socializing towards the end of November. This year just gone was the first time I have missed Christmas in Dublin except for one other time in my entire life. And yeah, it was quite sad to miss it and think that everyone was out there with the twinkly lights and the pints, silly jumpers on, and Christmas music. You meet up with people you haven't seen in ages. And I write about a thing called 12 pubs. No one does that much anymore because a lot of the pubs barred it. But it was probably really at its peak 15, 20 years ago, where you'd go on a pub crawl for the day and you'd wear a Christmas jumper and you'd have to go to 12 pubs. And that would be the aim of like the pub crawl, but you'd have to have a drink in every pub, and there would be rules for each pub. And some of them were quite extreme. Like in one pub, you could only drink with your left hand. You might only have to be able to speak Irish in the next pub. And if you if you make a mistake, then you have to probably drink a shot. It's a young person's game.
Now, why on earth would pub landlords not want them in?
Yeah. It really took off, and then over the years you'd see places be like, no 12 pubs, no Christmas jumpers, none of this. But I did a few years, and oh my God, yeah, there's just a nice vibe in Dublin around that time, and it kind of lasts the whole of December now, which some people are bah humbug, Grinch about Christmas being that long. But I think when it's really dark here in the winter, you need Christmas lights and Christmas music and a bit of jolliness in the air to get through.
But I liked how you described, done some shopping. It's maybe just a hurried kind of meet up with a friend. You haven't seen them. It might only be one or two, but there's just those windows of time that pop up between running the errands at Christmas, shopping, that are different than other times of the year.
Yeah, because if you're in, like, say, the main shopping street, which is like Grafton Street or something, that week before Christmas in Dublin, you could be there every week of the year, but you'd never necessarily send out a text message and go, who's around for a pint? But if you do that in December, you'd be guaranteed that someone is around and available and wants to meet up.
It really reminded me of the night before Thanksgiving in the United States. And that has taken on a life of its own of this. People are back in town, it's those friends from high school, friends from uni. It's a chance you might only see them once every few years back at the old bar that maybe you went to when you were 18 or 20. And people
Yeah.
go out, and the next day it's just wake up, it's eat.
Yeah, and we that for us that would be Christmas Eve. That's usually when you go back to your parents, back to your hometown. I'm at an age now where most of my friends have small children, so Christmases are very different. But for a long time, and especially when I lived in London and I'd come home, like that would be the night you'd want to go out and see everybody and see what was going on. And I'm sure now when everyone's children grow up, we'll maybe go back to having like a Christmas Eve pint. But yeah, there's just something even talking about it now, I'm a bit, I suppose, melancholic that I missed Christmas.
Okay, so let's go through a couple more. Talk about snugs. If you could let people know what a snug is in a pub, this magical place.
Okay, so in an Irish pub, you will often have like a little cordoned off section that is just a small section to the side of the bar that has a door that closes and a couple of uncomfortable seats inside. And the idea is back in the day that people who didn't want to be seen in the pub or maybe weren't supposed to be in the pub would have a drink in there. So that might be women, that might be the clergy, that might be men in uniform. And a lot of our pubs still have them. One of the greatest things, I suppose, my appreciation when I was writing the book was I've always loved pubs, but I don't think I appreciated quite how much of living museums they are and how lucky we are and unique in Ireland that some of the places we drink in are regularly that we don't even think about are 200-year-old and haven't changed. And some of these snugs are 100 or more years old and we don't think twice about them. And the kind of irony of drinking in them for me, if I'm going to the pub, that's where I want to sit. It just feels like the best seat in the house. There's usually a little hatch so you can pull it across or it's open and you can order directly from the bar so you don't even have to get out. So the minute I walk into a pub with a snug, I'm checking who's there, is there space there? And, you know, yeah, the irony is not lost on me that that's where I want to sit because if it had been 50 or 60 years ago, that would be the only place that I would have been allowed to sit as a woman in a few of the pubs. One of my favorite things about writing about the snug was I wrote that chapter quite passionately. I mean, they're all written quite passionately, but like I really, really, really adore the snug. And I wrote about being a snug cuckoo, which I didn't realize my friend who like did my introduction, who's a food writer, was like, that's new language I've never heard. I just thought me and my friends always said it. Like, if I go into a pub, I'm going to flit around the snug and wait until, like, I'm going to jump on that opportunity. And if I go in and you're sitting there, just you and your friend, I'm going to say, like, oh, is there space in there? And I'll come and sit with you. And then one of my friends will come and another one and another one. And slowly we'll take over.
Surely the snug is peak pub.
Yeah. For me, it is. And I think that, have you ever been in a snug?
I have.
Like there's, you can't describe it. It just feels like it's the ultimate pint because I think I talk a lot about pints feeling like they are kind of divilment. Do you know the word we use in Ireland? Divilment means like anything could happen, kind of crack. It's a bit of that, like it's kind of open-ended fun. You're going to have a pint and you might just have one or two and it might be great, but it might also turn into like the best night of your life or the worst, but anything could happen. And the snug has that kind of air of divilment and unknown and sort of secretness about it. I don't know. It just encompasses all of the things that I think you want when you are having a pint.
And somehow, and you touched on this, if you're patient, somehow it almost always works out that you get the snug.
I have very good snug luck, yes. But like you might call it manifesting nowadays. Like you just can't take your eyes off it. If you want to talk a bit about travel, some of my favorite snugs in Ireland are not in Dublin. I would say have you been to Dingle or do you know Dingle in County Kerry?
I've been down that way once.
Well, Dingle is possibly one of the greatest pub towns in Ireland. So therefore, probably one of the best pub towns in the world. And there is snugs in quite a few of those pubs. So we'll sometimes go for a weekend for a festival. There's a few different events on, and we have like a snug WhatsApp. We'll go early and get a seat in the snug and Dick Max. But then if someone else is like, well, I'd go over to Curran's, and then if they get the snug, they're like, right, we're in the snug here now. And then we'll move, but we won't move without passing the snug on to someone else we think it's worthy of. So if we know someone else is looking for it, we'd be like, we're just about to leave now. a net, you can kind of have a little network of snugs when there's quite a few of you in the town, because Dingle would be a place that I would go there for. They do music festivals, they do food festivals, so you might spend like the whole weekend there, and you can just go from gorgeous pub to gorgeous pub to gorgeous pub. There's a good few towns like that, but that's probably the best known town for it.
You and your crew are like the snug mafia.
Yeah, like I'd say I have many WhatsApp groups with different versions of like snug life. That's like usually a favorite.
Yeah, and then as long as someone's still in there as a representative of the group, the rest of the crew can go out and do and then come back because it's saving, you know.
Yeah. And what's really nice about the snug is because I've written about it and I'm very vocally passionate about it, and I've spoken about it on various talks and interviews, is I'll often get photos or tagged in social media posts in snugs in different parts of the country. And sometimes I've got a few people who've like brought the book to the pub with them and sat in a snug and like read that chapter and sent me a photo. There's nothing nicer, especially if it's someone you don't know. If it's someone you sort of know, even have a parasocial relationship with, it's cool. But then when it's someone totally random that they thought about it and they read it and they got it enough to go, I'm going to bring this to a snug, or even just even to the pub with me. When people post that they're in the pub reading this, yeah, it's quite cool. The funny thing about this book is it's always interesting speaking to people who aren't Irish and how what they find interesting in it, because Irish people, I get a lot of people say, oh my God, like I just wrote down what all of us think. It's not really a unique viewpoint in Ireland. It's just that I wrote it. And other people think the same, but haven't written it down like I have and put this. The illustrations mean a lot to me as well. Yeah, it's interesting the things that stand out to Irish people and the things that stand out then to like non-Irish. It's kind of
Sure.
funny. And I love people who have lived in Ireland for quite a while and maybe have an Irish partner. They've got to know those parts of the culture. Like I got a lot of messages about the rounds. I don't know if you saw that chapter.
Oh yeah, I saw them all.
Oh, I got a lot of messages about rounds and people being like, thank you for writing it down and explaining it. Like someone who was married to a Dutch man for years and someone who's married to a German, and they're like trying to explain to them, like, you have to buy a round. This is why, this is why. And that it's not just like it goes back into our history of hospitality and the Brehon laws, and it goes right back to Celtic Ireland to offer hospitality and to be seen as generous and not to be thought of as not looking after the person that you're with. So it was really nice to kind of get that point across. And I suppose we all know that innately as Irish people, we're brought up to think that one of the worst things you could be thought of is of being stingy or not generous. So that's why rounds are like a big deal. So it was cool to kind of spread the word about that. In general, if you buy someone a drink, they buy you a drink, you buy one back, vice versa. And I've got a really nice quote in there that my friend Judith gave me, which was about drink karma. She owns a pub and she lectures about drink. And she's a brewer, so she is very involved in that world. And she was like, you have to trust that if you and I go to the pub and I buy her a pint and blah, 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 and then she has to go and get the bus home and I still owe her one, or vice versa, the drink karma, it'll always come back to you.
He described sports and pints. You know, actually, you mentioned Kerry, and I had a nice experience there once. I kind of forget what exact sporting event it was, but I believe it was Gaelic football. And
Yeah.
it was end of August, and it was a big
Okay.
game. And I happened to be in a pub with
Yeah.
fans rooting on the local team, and that was a great experience.
I'm not a huge Gaelic football or hurling or rugby fan. I definitely would be soccer. So I was really easy for me to write the bit about soccer. But for the rest of it, I got a bit of help from my friend Neil. And I wrote it and he like fact checked and gave me some more of the Gaelic football sort of nuances about pints. But I'd always recommend going to a match or being around. So I live quite close to Croke Park where they play the Gaelic football All Ireland finals, and every bit of pub land around here is absolutely packed out. Everyone's wearing their county colours. It's a great atmosphere. People are just in a good mood, and GAA fans are very different to like football fans, GAA is a kind of friendlier sort of atmosphere in the pubs and in the grounds and everything. It's kind of family friendly. It's quite nice.
Or they don't have to be separated or
No, no. Like there definitely is pubs that like you know, if it was like Tipperary and Donegal, there'll be pubs owned by someone from Tipperary, and there'll be different pubs that will declare, you know, or they just everyone will know that's a Donegal pub or whatever. But for the most part, everyone mixes and it's lovely.
I liked how you also covered silver screen pints, and how the Irish pub is portrayed in Hollywood, and how I got the impression that you'd be watching a movie, but they wouldn't do that. That's not how it would be.
Yeah, most of the time it's terrible. Most of the time the pints look horrific. Like I think I mentioned a few in there, and probably the most famous one that a lot of people would have seen recently is the Banshees of Inisherin. Now they do drink very sad looking pints, but then when I looked into that, I realized that's kind of what they were sort of true to the time. So they would have been in poured from glasses, not necessarily on tap. But like, oh God, there's so many. And it's like any movie made in Ireland, they usually have to have a pub scene.
Of course.
And it's usually like everyone's up Irish dancing and yeah. And it's like bigosh and bigara. Yes, we do Irish dance in the pub. And yes, we have trad music in the pub, but it's not the way it's portrayed. It's like a bit more nuanced than that. And you don't just like walk into like the local pub in the middle of the day and there's like a hoolie going on. That's definitely feels more like the Disneyfication of the pubs. And like, yeah, you probably get it in Temple Bar, but you wouldn't get it in like my local.
You know, that Temple Bar, that's a type of pub, and go see it, but that's not the kind of pub that most Irish people are drinking in.
No, and I always say with Temple Bar, like if you're visiting Dublin, you're going to do it. It's the same way when we all go to New York, we are going to go look at Times Square, even though New Yorkers probably don't ever go to Times Square for anything. You go to Paris, you want to look at the Eiffel Tower. So, like, you tick all those boxes. And I do think people have a vision of what they think the pub is going to be like in Dublin, and maybe Temple Bar delivers that. There's live music all day. You can have fish and chips and a fry. It's like it looks the part. But like literally you just cross the road and you're in the places that we do drink in. And there's loads of little pockets in Dublin where you'll find much more authentic pubs. And it's really nice in Dublin because, you know, anytime you are in the pub, you probably are like 40 or 50% of people are tourists. But then it's nice to be in the pubs that are also the everyday pubs that Dubliners use all the time. But like I'd always say, if you're coming to Dublin or wherever, or Galway, you know, do a very touristy pub one night and then do the more local pubs the next night. So you get a bit of both, or not. Because then especially if you're outside of Dublin and you go down the country, those are the pubs that genuinely have trad on like most nights of the week. And you kind of have those caricatures maybe that you imagine we have in Ireland because they're cliches for a reason.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform.
Sorry for the interruption, but I just wanted to take a second to say thanks for listening to Rails, Ales, and Old Towns. I hope you're enjoying the show and it's helping you get excited for your next European adventure. Be sure to check out the episode description because that's where you'll find a link to the show notes and the show's social media info. There's also a link there where you can support the podcast by buying me a beer. I mean coffee, definitely a coffee. All joking aside, any support goes toward keeping the episodes flowing and the show growing. And last but not least, if you are enjoying what you're hearing and you have a spare minute, I'd be forever grateful if you were to leave a review on the platform you're listening on, as those little things really do go a long way. Back to the show.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform.
What is your favorite thing to pair up with a pint to eat?
Oh, crisps. So by crisps, I mean, in America, you'd say chips. And most Irish pubs will have a selection of crisps. I write about it in there and I call them Irish tapas. So when you have a pint and you open a few packets of crisps, there's different types. There's obviously Tato is the most famous, which are delicious. But my personal favorite is scampi fries, which are like scampi lemon flavored kind of corn snack crisps, and you also have bacon fries. They're divine. I think scampi and bacon fries are English. We just have a love for them here that I always write about. I think, markers that it's going to be a good pub. If I go to a pub and they've only got like Pringles behind the bar, I'm a bit nervous it's not going to be a good pub because I don't think that Pringles are really pub crisps. I understand they stack easily, but really you want like Tato, which are quite famous. But there is actually probably three cheese onion types of the old school brands. So you'll have Tato, you've got King, and you've got Manhattan. And Manhattan are a Dublin crisp that are a particular pub. You don't find them in the shop very often. If you do, you're like, ooh, and they come in this very glamorous black and gold packet. And I think they're like the elite cheese and onion crisp. I had known a little bit about Irish crisps, obviously, before I wrote, because I write about food, but like to kind of confirm that Dublin, Ireland invented the flavour cheese and onion crisp. Like, and now that's all over the world. And that's down to a man who lived in Dublin called Joe Spud Murphy. Pretty cool. If you come to Ireland, you have to have a pint with a few packets of crisps, and you should try them all. And a toasty, maybe as well. We have a lot of pub toasties. I definitely think when people come here, they're like, what is the story with the toasties? Why do all the pubs have the toasties? We don't have a history of serving food in pubs. It's very different to the UK, where there would be a tradition of serving food in pubs. And obviously, 20 years ago, there was like the renaissance of British food that started all the gastropubs, and it never really took off here because we definitely think of the pubs as drinking establishments and not as eating establishments. But quite a few pubs will serve a pub toasty, which is very straightforward, white sliced pan, packet cheese, cheddar, ham, and then just toasted either, on a hot plate, or some of them you get in a little toasty bag and they pop it in the toaster, and you might have a little bit of mustard on the side. And a couple of them will save you if you have decided to stay in the pub and forgot to have dinner.
Sometimes that's all you need.
Oh, it's joyous. And sometimes there's days where you're like, I'm going to go to the pub for the afternoon. And I prefer the afternoon in the pub now than the night in the pub. And yeah, there's nothing better than when you're like, okay, well, I'm probably not going to go out and eat or have dinner when I come home, but you've had a few toasties and a few packets of crisps throughout the afternoon when you've had a few pints. It's glorious.
Now, one last thing I want to ask you about the love for beer mats.
Not just a love for beer mats, but a bafflement at the rest of the world. I was in London last week with a few Irish people. We just went for the day for a meeting, and we were coming home and we were like, we'll just go for a quick pint before we get on the tube. Yeah, I said, there won't be any beer mats. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? I was like, there's not going to be any beer mats in here. They had napkins. And it was a pub. It was a proper old English pub. And they had no beer mats. And then, it's just drippy and the napkin gets wet. And it's just uncivilized. And in Ireland, I don't know, we still have beer mats every pub you go to. And I know for the environment, they're probably not great because they're usually cardboard and nothing else seems to do the job as well as a cardboard beer mat. But they are particular. If I have a choice of beer mats in the pub, I want my beer mat to match my pint. So if I'm drinking Guinness, I want a Guinness beer mat. If I'm drinking Heineken, I want a Heineken beer mat. That happens less because now there's probably not as much choice. But back in the day, you'd have a choice of your beer mats. So I was in the pub 2 weeks ago, a place called Walsh's in Stony Batter in Dublin. A gem, a perfect kind of Dublin pub. The bar manager, he's quite senior there. He goes around on Saturday night and puts beer mats underneath, even when they're heaving. He goes around and put beer mats underneath everybody's pint. And I'm like, thank you. I appreciate you. That is wonderful. And he's like, I wouldn't do it at home. I don't care if I use a coaster. But he's like, but in my pub, in my house, which is his pub, you're all using beer mats. In the book as well, I write about like they used to have much more meaning in a pub, because back before, if you were meeting someone in the pub, you mightn't have a specific time. You wouldn't have had mobile phones. You might have had Snake on your phone to play. You wouldn't have had your Wordle. You couldn't have gone on Instagram while you're waiting for your friend or sitting on your own. You'd be sitting there, you'd have a beer mat and you might play with it. If you thought of something, you'd write it down. Like if you were giving someone your number, you'd write it on a beer mat and hand it to them. The beer mats used to have a lot more, I think, uses than they do now. But now then they came in really handy now when they, like, if people still go out for a smoke, if you go out for a cigarette, you put your beer mat on top of your pint, and then that means don't touch my pint.
But yes, the amount of times you hear of a story where I had this wonderful idea, this great world changing idea, and I scribbled it on the back of a beer mat.
There's definitely stories of various musicians, like Shane MacGowan used to write on beer mat. So they're quite, I suppose, iconic in that way. And I hope that even though I am very much want to care about the environment, I do care about the environment. I want us to keep disposable beer mats. Sorry. We've gotten rid of straws, but please can we keep beer mats?
Okay, that's a compromise. Is there anything that you changed your mind on writing the book?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. I think when I sat down and wrote about Irish pubs outside of Ireland, I thought about them differently because I think that we can be quite disparaging about them. But when I wrote about it and thought about all the times I have gone to an Irish pub while I've been abroad, while I've lived abroad, particularly, like what they meant to me. And I think I write about them, I call them de facto embassies. When I first was 17 and I moved to Greece for the summer, like the first place we went to was the Irish pub to say, hi, is there any jobs? Do you know what's happening? And it wasn't necessarily an Irish pub. It was called the Fun Pub. They served Guinness, but the manager, the guy who owned it, was Irish. So that made it an Irish pub. And he used to do a Sunday roast on Sunday. So like the Irish people would all congregate there. I actually ended up working there the following summer. That's where you'd go, be a notice board, where you'd find out. I think we got the house to stay in from going and asking. And the same in London. I wouldn't necessarily gone to that many Irish pubs, but Irish adjacent pubs. And I think that we could be quite like roll our eyes at the Irish pubs abroad because they do sometimes have a bad reputation. But I think actually I realized that they do a very good job at what they do. And sometimes, like if you go anywhere in the world, there's an Irish pub in every city in the world. And it's kind of comforting to think that we are all over the world in that capacity and that you're never going to have a bad time. Like, yeah, you might be somewhere and soaking up the culture, but if you are traveling, backpacking, whatever for a few months, it's nice to sometimes go back to that comfort of hospitality, pint, a chat, just you kind of know what you're going to get. And I think that there's many people who travel that have never been to Ireland and aren't Irish and think the same about Irish pubs and will pick them out if they're in a city abroad and go, well, I know the kind of food I'm going to get. I know the kind of service I'm going to get. I know I can watch the match if you're into sport. Yeah, I think I changed my mind. I thought a little bad about them and now I actually love them and probably go to more when I'm abroad now than I used to.
Yeah, I've got a special love for them because I always just whenever there's a big game on, whether it's the Super Bowl and I'm sitting here watching it or, you know, these big soccer games around the world, I always think somehow it'll always pop in my head to think that there's somebody in New Zealand, there's somebody in India, there's someone in South Africa or Brazil who's they've gone to an Irish pub because they know they're going to be able to watch that game. And it's this meeting point of the world where you'll get this. There's a table full of people that didn't know each other before, and they're from all different countries. There might be some Irish people, but they'll be
an Irish person.
Yeah, but they'll be bonding at this Irish pub that we all kind of feel like we own a piece of it, even if we're not Irish.
Yeah, they are. They're special places. And like, I always think they don't need to look Irish. If there's an Irish owner or an Irish like manager, Irish people working there, they can feel Irish. One of the best pints of Guinness I had when I was traveling recently was in an English pub in Singapore, but it had the Irish sentimental kind of vibe to it. It's almost intangible what makes a pub good. Like, it's not the decor, like all those things matter. The look and the feel and the drink and the music or non-music, like they all matter, but there's no formula for a perfect Irish pub. There is a company that is just called the Irish Pub and they build Irish pubs all over the world and they buy all the pub paraphernalia and they have the vintage Guinness posters. They have all that authentic stuff, but it doesn't always translate to a good pub.
Speaking of that, let's take a little bit of a tour of, your Dublin. There's a few pubs that you'd send us in the right direction,
Yeah, I'd say most people that come to Dublin are going to want to do the Guinness Storehouse. It's very good, it's fun. But my recommendation is walk there and back because the pubs on that stretch. So if you're staying in the city centre, to walk to the Guinness storehouse, maybe like 25 minutes. So I would walk from the city centre to Guinness and back and stop off along the way because the pubs on that street, it's Thomas Street, James, like along there, they are proper Dublin pubs. That is still part of the inner city where people still live and have lived for generations. So you're probably going to sit beside people who have lived there their whole lives. And because it's quite a touristy area, they're usually up for talking. So you kind of get that authentic pub feel that you're looking for in Dublin. And there's ones along there, like the Thomas House is like a kind of more modern one. God, there's one there I never remember the name of, and I always go into it, and it feels like a country pub in the city. But there's just all along there is a good strip of pubs. Another part in Dublin that gets a bit overlooked is the north side. We've got like the River Liffey down the middle, and on the south side is Temple Bar, Trinity College, Grafton Street, Stephen's Green. So you've got a lot of the heavy hitter tourist things. And then on the north side, it's a bit more like not as glamorous, say, but really, really good pubs. You'll get some really great pubs over on the north side. There's one along there that I adore called the Confession Box. They'll pour some of the most perfect pints. The Confession Box is actually often what you call a snug as well. That would be like a nickname for a snug, is like the Confession Box, because it's like going to confession at mass. That's a really good pub. And there's another street called Capel Street, which is really cool on the north side. And that's got some excellent pub. The Boar's Head, which is there a long, long time. You've got a mix of pubs there, so it's really interesting. You've got the Boar's Head, old school, probably like sports on sometimes, brilliant. MacNeil's, which is like a music pub, which is really good. And then you've got Bar 1661 around the corner, which is not a pub, but it's a bar in a pub, but it's probably one of the best cocktail bars in Europe. You can still get a pint in there, but he doesn't really want you to drink pints, but you can order a pint. Really good for Irish coffee, Belfast coffee. A Belfast coffee is an Irish coffee with poachine instead of whiskey. You know poachine?
I am not familiar.
Poachine is the traditional Irish spirit. So it would be our moonshine.
Ah.
It's like a clear spirit, technically made from potatoes. It doesn't have to be, but it would have been something that everyone would have brewed at home and you would have been very potent. And then I'd say in the last decade or so, people have started making kind of artisan commercially. The guy who owns this bar has done that, and then he has created drinks around this poachine. So it's a cool drink to go because everyone will come and have an Irish coffee, and the Irish coffees are really good. But then a Belfast coffee is with poachine, and it's very, very good. But like that little corner, Capel Street, there's also a place there called the Hacienda, which is like an enigma. It's like this pub that only opens late at night, and it looks like an old like Spanish building. And you have to ring the doorbell. The guy will decide whether he likes the look of you or not and let you in. That's almost got cult status now. So whenever there's some very famous celebrities in town, they'll often end up in the Hacienda. It's like the place to go, but you're not always going to get in. So that's a good little corner of town that I don't think a lot of tourists would go to, but they should. And there's actually one more great pub along there a little bit further down called Fidelity, which is a more modern pub, and they brew loads of their own beer, but it's incredible. They do great DJ nights, and yeah, you'll find that's kind of where the Dubliners are.
Yeah, the Hacienda, that sounds good. You might not get in, but there's plenty of backups around there if you don't.
Yeah, but a fail-proof thing to do is one of the lists I have in there is the Victorian pubs. You know, we're very lucky that we still have those pubs that are still standing, and a lot of them are this authentic decor from Victorian times, and we take them for granted because we've drank in pubs like this our entire lives. Unfortunately, lots of them got ruined in the 2000s when people did everything up with loads of money. But the ones that are still there are pretty unique to go to. You never have a bad time if you just did a loop of Toners, Donaghy and Nesbitt, Keogh's. Those city centre old school pubs are always good.
Yeah, so mix and match.
Yeah, mix and match. And I always think if you're in a pub that you really like, ask the bar staff. Or if you're getting a really nice coffee in the morning and you're in a cool coffee shop, I'm always like, where do you go? What's the pub you go to? I discovered one of my favorite pubs in Belfast that way. Belfast is a very underrated city for tourists, for traveling. It's fantastic. It's better value than Dublin, has excellent food and drink and really, really cool pubs. But there's a pub up there called Madden's, which is just, you have to ring the doorbell to get into Madden's as well, but they always let you in. But it's very, very cool. And I found out about that years ago because I was in a restaurant that I really liked. And I said to the guy, where do you guys go for a drink after work? And he said, Madden's is the best pint. And now that's my go-to in Belfast and probably one of my favorite pubs in the country.
I think we'll end it there. Thanks again for writing the book. This should be required reading before you go to Ireland. I haven't been to Ireland since I read it, but I know that it's going to make my trip a little richer and next time I go. So
thanks.
How can people get their hands on it?
I'm on Instagram at Ali Dunworth, and I always have a link there. You can buy direct from the publisher, which is the nicest way to buy it from me. The publisher is 9 Bean Rose, but doesn't necessarily deliver everywhere. You can usually buy it on some of the other websites. There is an Irish book website called kenny's.ie that deliver, I think, all over Europe, possibly all over the world. So yeah, I would just ask you to avoid buying it from Amazon because it gets very little to the author. So if you can buy it from a bookshop, please do.
Thanks again, Ali.
Thank you.